Whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in and spending a little bit of time with me today. I'm Carol Kando-Pineda. I'm an attorney with the Federal Trade Commission, and I'm here today to talk to you about helping your patrons recover from identity theft. So let's jump in and get started, and I'm hoping that you come away with this with some tips and resources that'll help you if you happen to run into somebody that has this problem. So just briefly, what we'll cover is what identity theft is, how it happens, and then the things that you can do to help somebody recover from it and to reduce your risk a little bit. All right, so what is identity theft? In short, identity theft is somebody stealing and misusing your personal information. So to either buy things or get money or to get some sort of benefit or service rightfully. So it happens in a variety of ways. I think a lot of the time, the person who maybe is impacted by identity theft doesn't necessarily know how it might have happened, right? It could happen on a lot of different ways. Some of the most popular ways is if you lose your wallet or your wallet's stolen. Same thing with your smartphone. Now there's an awful lot of information on your phone, and somebody might even be able to get more information about you from your phone than from your wallet. A lot of identity theft is committed by family and friends. If you live with other people, information is probably around your home, and if it's not secured, somebody can pick it up and look at it and use it if they're so inclined to do that. Dumpster diving, good old-fashioned crooks going into a dumpster and going through garbage and seeing what papers they can find, what medicine bottles they might be able to find that have got some information on there, any kind of accounts or anything that's got personal information on it, they might be able to use. They'll steal the mail right out of your mailbox. If you happen to live in a place where the mail is out and somebody could come along and swipe it, they'll try to do that. And then sometimes information is bought from a corrupt insider. It could be at a hotel or a medical clinic or a car rental agency, any kind of place where you're exchanging your information for the service or to access a service, which is just about anything these days. There could be somebody there that's stealing the information and selling it along to a thief. So there is high-tech ways where your information might be stolen as well. I think people are familiar with data breaches. Sadly, they're all around us, and they're prevalent. And even if somebody is taking steps to protect clients, customers' information, still might happen. Phishing is when there's a little bit of social engineering involved. It's generally through email, but it could be through text, it could be through a phone call, where somebody calls up or emails you and pretends to be a legitimate business that you do business with, a government agency that might need to contact you. Sometimes they even pretend to be somebody that you know, and they try to convince you that you need to either confirm your account, give them some sort of information to unlock your account, to get some kind of a benefit, to fix some sort of a problem. And usually it happens pretty fast. And before you know, you've revealed a little bit of information. And that you don't even need to have given them all of your information. Sometimes just a small piece of information that might seem isolated or discreet or not very harmful could be harmful because they might have other information about you that they've bought from different other services or gotten from other databases, and that they're able to piece things together once they get another little bit of information from you. So it's important for people to know that you want to try to keep all of your information private. It's not necessarily a defense. It doesn't necessarily protect you just because you've only revealed a little tiny bit of it. And then imposter scams kind of fall on phishing. Imposter scams happen when somebody pretends to be somebody illegitimate. It's usually a little bit stepped up. There's usually more than phishing even, where there's some sort of a story that creates some sort of panic or a a frightened feeling, a sense of urgency that you need to act right now, or something really seriously bad is going to happen to you or to somebody that you love, that your social security number is compromised, that a family member is in trouble and you need to send money right away. With imposter scams, they may be trying to get you to send money directly, either to wire money to them or to send a gift card to them for payment, so that they'll help you make this bad thing go away. And they try to pressure you to act really, really quickly so that you don't have time to think about it. Very often in the course of that, they may try to get other information from you so that they can also capitalize on selling your data to commit identity theft. And then the two at the top I saved for last because I've got some pictures to sort of illustrate that. So skimming and shimming involve using devices in ATM machines or chip card readers to be able to download your information so that the thief can then steal it that way. It's kind of like a little, sounds like a spy thing almost. So you'll see here in this picture, there is a hand that's sort of removing part of the ATM. And there's like a little skimming device inside there. So when you go to use the ATM, you insert your card into the slot, and there's a reader that then can download your information from that mag strip on your ATM card and capture all your payment information, right? And then in this photo, you'll see there's like a little, I think that's like a little camera that's down in the lower slot that's on the ATM that somebody has inserted in there. And they can look at your PIN number and watch the transaction or copy other information. And so they can take this information and either clone a new card with a new mag strip in somebody else's name to be able to take money out of your account, or to sell it someplace else, to sell your information. And so the shimmers are the same thing. They're a little bit newer because they target the chip on the EMV card. So when you, so this is how it works. They insert, it's paper thin. It's a little card the size of a credit card or the size of your debit card, whatever you're using, your ATM card. It's paper thin and it's wedged in to that reader, into that slot. So they have to do this surreptitiously. So, chances are, it's not going to be in a store where there are lots of people around unless it's a corrupt insider, and even that would be pretty difficult to do. But freestanding ATMs or an ATM that's attached someplace that's open 24 hours that might not be under surveillance, or, if they could block the view of the camera, they might be able to insert that device. It's not visible from the outside of the ATM, so you can't see it. And when you insert your chip and PIN card into that reader, it reads the data from the chip, the same way that the skimmer reads from the mag strip. So when it reads the data from the chip, that can't be used to make a new chip card, but it can be used to make a new mag stripe card with all of your information on it that they would use for the same purposes, to steal money from you. So what can you do about shimmers? Because this is, it's kind of a new thing. And with skimmers, you would just need to sort of be aware of, maybe look around the ATM before you insert your card. I've heard from people sometimes you can tell there's something not quite right about the ATM. These things they're not put up there for, months at a time. The scammer will put in there and modify the ATM with the skimmer or the shimmer for a pretty short period of time, just hoping to get as many people as possible during that period of time, and then they come and remove it, or they come and get what they need, and the bank discovers it, and it's taken off. So the bank should be checking the ATMs on a regular basis to make sure that nothing looks tampered with, and they can, if something does happen, they can mitigate it as soon as possible. With the shimmer, it's a little more difficult because it's harder to detect that something's been mishandled on the ATM. So And the way the scammer downloads the information is they just go up to the ATM with this little device that looks like a credit card. So it looks like they're just using the ATM. So a security camera might not necessarily know unless they've picked up other signs that this could possibly be the scammer. And they'll insert that card, the paper thin card, and they'll download all of the data that's on that shimmer and take it out and be on their way. And if somebody finds the shimmer, it doesn't matter, they've gotten a good hit from it, they can always go back and check it at another time. Again, we sort of depend on the banks to be kind of vigilant about what's going on at their bank and to check those things. So where this is kind of new and it's a little bit more unobtrusive, we do have some tips for how you can avoid shimmers. So whenever possible, you want to use a credit card, not a debit card. The reason for that is there are legal protections in place on credit cards. So if you report an unauthorized use of your credit card, through, whether it's somebody buying something or withdrawing money from an account, then you have those protections and you won't be charged for any unauthorized charges within certain limits. With the debit card, that's not really true. Once you use a debit card, somebody can drain your entire bank account with the debit card, and it's really difficult to get that resolved. You want to try to use ATMs that are inside the bank or that have got some, like a security or close by, so it would be difficult for somebody to try to modify the ATM. Same thing if you're going to pay for gas, maybe go inside instead of using the chip reader right at the pump. It's a little less convenient, but it is a protection if that's something that you want to be concerned about. Under any circumstance, you want to watch all of your statements really carefully, because if somebody did grab your information, then they're going to start to use it pretty quickly, and those charges will show up right away. And so you want to act just as fast to try to shut them down and to mitigate any of the damages that you might suffer from them using your information. We've suggested to people that they cover the keypad when they're entering the PIN in case there is some sort of a camera there tracking your motions. The card isn't as much use to them if they don't have the PIN as well. So you can always cover the keypad and try to prevent them from getting that. And then consider other kinds of payment methods like Apple Pay or Android Pay or anything that's sort of touch and go that you don't have to insert the chip at all. For now, those are probably safer alternatives. So just to put the whole problem in context, the latest data we have from the Department of Justice is 26 million identity theft victims, and that's as of maybe 4 years ago. The amount of total financial losses for that same time period was 17.5 billion. So that's in total over years, but currently in the United States at that time. So it's still quite a significant issue, and there's an enormous amount of money that's being lost due to identity theft. I can tell you that every year FTC gets about 3.2 million reports from consumers about all different kinds of consumer issues. About 1.7 million of those are related to fraud, including identity theft. So of the 1.7 million, about 20% are identity theft complaints. That's about 650,000 every year, give or take. So we're still getting a lot of complaints every year about identity theft. FTC was charged about 20 years ago with coming up with, by Congress, there was a law passed that wanted FTC to collect all of the identity theft complaints in the country and put them into a clearinghouse and make them available to other law enforcers. So police departments, federal prosecutors, state prosecutors could go into a secure online database and look at the complaints and try to figure out whether there was a case there, was there a big identity theft ring that jurisdictions could collaborate maybe to prosecute that. Identity theft is a crime. We are a civil law enforcement agency, so FTC can't take any action against identity thieves, but we've been asked to collect all of these complaints and develop consumer education efforts every year as identity theft evolves and as things change, and to figure out where it is that we need to let consumers know what's happening and to work with partners to get that word out about the information. Okay, so just another quick overview kind of question. What type of identity theft is on the rise? Child ID theft, tax ID theft, credit card ID theft, or medical ID theft? And it's funny, people will answer this in different ways, depending on the year, depending on the month. But the answer is right now, credit card identity theft. So the reason this is a little bit of a surprise is that 25 years ago, we started out, credit card identity theft was the main form of identity theft. That's what was happening to people. Their credit card accounts were being compromised, and the information was being stolen from those accounts. Over the years, it's gravitated to other kinds of things, and it's evolved a little bit. And over the past maybe 5-6 years, tax identity theft was the #1 form of identity theft. And it was, people were having their social security numbers compromised, and the scammers were getting their tax refunds. So for a while, we really saw that spiking. And we worked with the IRS to give them information and get their information out to people. And IRS developed a program to flag those returns and to help people. And gradually over time, enough people started to, IRS got a handle on it, and enough people started to understand what identity theft was, and to recognize the signs of tax ID theft, and to act on them faster. And so now we're seeing that tax identity theft, tax fraud, is 46% down and 23% up for credit card fraud. So scammers are sort of going back to the old forms of identity theft. That doesn't mean that tax identity theft won't rise again. It doesn't mean that we might not have a sudden spike in child ID theft or medical ID theft, or a completely different form of ID theft. But for now, that's kind of where the picture is. And really, mostly it illustrates the fact that scammers follow the headlines, and they follow those opportunities. And if there's a gap in knowledge, they take advantage of that gap and jump right in and try to develop some sort of a scam that's going to scare and trick people, because we're still early on and people don't have any good information and they're not sure what to do. And so that's how we fall under the scammer's sway and do something that we regret later. So I wanted to just touch briefly on imposter scams. And as I mentioned, we've been charged with collecting all of these identity theft complaints. And for probably 20 years, identity theft was the #1 individual category of complaints. By far, we got more complaints about identity theft than we did about any number of other frauds and consumer issues. And over the years, a couple of other topics were sort of rising to the top: debt collection, complaints about debt collectors, and imposter scams. And so the three of those sort of were always the top three, but it was always identity theft for the last 3 or 4 years. And then they switched. Imposter scams became #1. You can see from this infographic here, nearly 1 in 5 people, if they lost money to an imposter scam, if they suffered an imposter scam, it was nearly 1 in 5 people that lost money. That's $488 million reported total losses for all kinds of imposter scams. Fake government agencies, fake businesses, somebody impersonating family and friends. They come in all different flavors and sizes, and but there's a lot of money at stake. And you can see the median loss is about $500, which is quite a bit of money, to think of people losing that in one of these scams. The reason I cite it here is that imposter scams help contribute to identity theft. So if somebody is tricking you into sending money and sending information, they may have gotten money for you in that quick hit, but they may have also gotten your information that will be used to commit identity theft as well. And we think that's why we see these top 3 complaint categories sort of switching places back and forth, right? Imposter scams, they're scams in and of themselves, but they also contribute to identity theft. And for identity theft victims, they may be experiencing problems with debt collectors, because a debt collector may be contacting them for a debt that isn't theirs, and that's how they find out that it's identity theft. So they're very interrelated in many respects. So if somebody comes to you and and says they're having problems with a debt collector, or they got this bill that they don't understand why they got it in the mail, or they got this notice from the IRS and they're not sure what to do. Or if they see it for what it is and they realize I might be an identity theft victim, what do? So the first thing you want to tell people is to call the companies where you know fraud occurred. So if somebody got their bill from Macy's, or they got an online statement from another company, and they see charges that don't belong to them, or all of a sudden they get a bill for an account that they never opened, or they look at their credit report and they see things on there that don't belong to them. Clearly, that's a sign of identity theft. So you want to go to that company, go to Macy's, call whoever you saw might have processed an identity theft charge in your name, and tell them. Call up the fraud department and tell them, this charge isn't mine. I'm a victim of identity theft. Please remove it, and please send me a letter confirming that you've done that. You want to get things in writing so that you have proof down the road. It might be a really simple process to clean this up. You might make some phone calls, send some proof, and then it's done. You'll have to be vigilant, but it probably cleaned up itself. Or it could be complicated and it could go on for a little bit of time, or you could resolve it and then it might rear up again a year from now. And so you want to have the records and the paperwork so that you can, show again without having to reinvent the wheel every time a question arises. So you'll have people do that. Let's see. The second thing is you want to place a fraud alert on your credit report and get copies of your credit report. So your credit report is really just a snapshot of your credit file. And your credit file it's lots of things. It's got, and I think I've got a slide later on that talks about that. But it's got your payment history, and if you've ever gone into bankruptcy or criminal convictions, things like that. So there's all kinds of information. And there are three main credit reporting companies: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. So you don't have to worry about all these other little ones right at the moment. It's these three main ones that are the sort of the key. They'll each have some form of a credit file on you. They'll be very, very similar, but probably not identical. And on any given day, they'll change. So the credit report is really just a snapshot of your credit file on the day that it was pulled. So you want to get copies of your credit report so that you can see kind of the universe of what your credit is for these three big companies, to see if they're all three of them are reporting this fraudulent charge, if there are other fraudulent charges, if there are accounts that have been opened in your name that you don't even know about, that sort of thing. And then of course you'll correct them and send them back to the company and tell them what you want removed from the credit report, because it's unauthorized, it's not yours. Can't get just anything removed just because you want it removed. It has to be unauthorized or not belong to, basically an unauthorized charge, an unauthorized account. But first, before you do anything, before you order the reports, you want to put a fraud alert on the credit reports for each of the companies. So, and I'll show you the fraud alert websites and telephone numbers. If you call one, that company has to call the other two. So if you call Equifax, they have to contact Experian and TransUnion to put that fraud alert on all three reports for all three companies. And you want to do that because it puts barriers in place to anybody calling to extend credit in your name. It raises a red flag. So it doesn't completely freeze down your credit, but it slows them down so a scammer is less likely to be able to get any more credit in your name. So about a year ago, there was a new law, and it granted some additional rights to consumers. It used to be that fraud alerts lasted just for 90 days, and that would give you enough time to quickly check out your credit reports, see what's going on, and maybe resolve things. You could renew them for another 90 days, but that meant you were renewing it. If you wanted it for a year and a half, you were renewing it several times, and you had to make a note to make sure that you did that. And for people who encounter identity theft and it becomes a long-term problem, that was a little bit burdensome for them. So now, for fraud alerts, they last a full year. So that's helpful. That gives you lots of time to be able to figure out what the situation is, to get it corrected, to mitigate the damage, and then figure out from there what you want to do going forward. But they also, in this law, determined that credit freezes really freeze your credit. So nobody, not even you, can get access to your credit. Some people prefer that because it's a little bit more secure and it's a little bit more of an extreme measure. Really depends a lot on your personality and your situation and what your choice is. But a lot of people do like having that option, especially if they've had repeated trouble with identity theft. And the cost of the credit freeze was determined by state law. So people paid different prices, maybe $5 or $10, to both place the freeze and to lift the freeze. And it took a little bit of time. It was a little bit of effort. And now under this new law, it's much easier to do. It's free for everybody. It's free now, just the way the fraud alert is free. And it's much easier. You can do it electronically, and the companies have to respond within, I think it's within 24 hours. But they have to respond very quickly if you're asking for the freeze electronically. So it makes it a much more useful option for people now. You can place the freeze and lift the freeze very quickly. You can do it for free, and you can be assured your credit is frozen until you decide to remove that. The law also provided that parents and guardians can freeze the credit of their children under 16 if they're concerned that identity theft might be an issue. You don't have to prove they've been an identity theft victim. You can just do it if you want to. And that's, it's probably not a bad idea. And you can also get a freeze if you manage the affairs of an incapacitated adult. I mean, you have to show that you have got power of attorney and that sort of thing. But that can be very helpful if you manage somebody else's money. And another side benefit is that they offered free electronic credit monitoring for active duty military starting last May. So that's a nice benefit to have if you counsel or you happen to see military patrons. That's a good benefit for them, because even if they have credit monitoring, it's not bad to have another service, because, as I said, the reports are different and they change all the time, and you might get a notice from that free electronic credit monitoring faster than you do from one of your others. It's a nice tool to have if it's available. And this is just a little bit more about the credit freezes. So the one thing about credit freezes is you have to contact each of the credit reporting agencies. With the fraud alert, you only have to contact one. So that it's a little bit of extra work. There's 2 more phone calls you might have to make. But as I said, it depends on, if you really want your credit frozen, then it's still a good option, and it's much more appealing right now. Oh, and then we've got the timeline right here. If you do it online or by phone, it has to be placed no later than 1 business day after the request. And if you want to lift it, they have to lift it within an hour. So it takes some of the inconvenience out of that, where if you, let's say you're still using your credit, right? There may be lots of people for freezing your credit. It's not such a big deal. They're not in the market for a mortgage. They're not buying a car. They're not paying for student loans. Their credit cards are all set. But for other people, if you're in the process of doing any of those things and you still need access to your credit, the credit freeze was less appealing. But now, where you can get it lifted so quickly, you can be in the middle of that process and think, okay, I'm going to lift my credit for a couple of days, and then you can freeze it again right away. And it's really not that much more effort. It's quick, and you're not paying anything for it. Okay, so this is just a slide. I'll go past this, but you have it if you need it. The kinds of information that's in a credit report. And then this is a promotional card that we have we have one for the average consumer, and then one for military consumers, since they have a few extra rights, that explains the difference between the fraud alert and the credit freeze, because very often we get questions about that from people. And then here are the telephone numbers for each of the credit reporting agencies and their websites, so that if you want to place a fraud alert or a credit freeze, that's where you go. At the bottom, there is a link to the FTC's bulk order website, where you can go and order our publications for free. We're happy to ship them out to you for free. Our our bulk order website was closed down due to the pandemic for a little while, and I believe it's back up and running now. So I think these cards are probably out of stock right at the moment. They've been very, very popular. So we're trying to get the print budget together to be able to print some more of them. But until then, you can go onto that link on the bulk order website, which is open again, and get the PDF so that you could at least print out the information if you wanted to do a back front sheet of paper to make it available for your patrons. And as with all of our material, you could cut and paste any of this information, anything on our bulk order website, anything on our main websites, and I'll give you those links, and put it on a print newsletter, an online newsletter, a blog, your website, your social media. Feel free to use any of that information. It's free, it's freely available. You don't have to get our permission. We want people to use it and to spread the word with it. Okay, so we went through the first two steps. Here's the third step: report the identity theft to the FTC at IdentityTheft.gov. So the reason, several reasons that you want to report it to the FTC. First, we're the agency that's charged with collecting all those complaints, so we want to hear about that. We want to know. It would have taken us a little bit longer to see that tax identity theft had overtaken credit card fraud if we hadn't heard from consumers and saw all those complaints, right? It's a little bit longer to dig it out in the marketplace on your own, but if people are letting you know, we have some idea of where the trends are and where we need to focus our efforts, and what we can share with other law enforcers about what we're seeing and where they can put their efforts as well. But really, the most helpful thing about IdentityTheft.gov and reporting it to FTC is that it helps you start that recovery process, and it gets you into a system that's going to make recovery just a little bit easier. And there you'll see, you can go online to report to the FTC in an online form that prompts you through the whole process, or you can call, and one of our counselors will talk you through the process and input it for you into the database, and then send you a link so that you can get the end result. Well, let's not do that yet. So the important thing about when you make the complaint to FTC, you make your report about identity theft. When you get to the end of the process, right before you can either print it out or you can save it as a PDF. It'll ask you to create an account. You don't have to, but if you do, then you can come back and update that account whenever anything new happens concerning your identity theft. So that can be helpful if you think the identity theft was limited to a few accounts, and you start the recovery process to those accounts, and then you find out 4 months later there are a few other accounts that were compromised. You can just go back in, add those accounts, reprint your report, and continue the process so that you don't have to start from scratch. So right before you get there and they ask you if you want to create the account, you can print it out and save it before you submit it. And it turns into, when it prints out or when you save it, up at the top it says identity theft report. And the reason it says that is an actual legal term in the law. So that identity theft report confers on you certain rights of an identity theft victim that you wouldn't have otherwise. So you can take that identity theft report, pair it with a letter, and send it to the credit reporting company and say, these charges are a result of identity theft. Please remove the following charges from my credit report. They don't belong to me. And here's the proof, the identity theft report. So that identity theft report helps you validate that you're the victim and to move the process along. Now, that company may want additional information from you, and that's fine. You do what you need to do to get that process moving. But many companies will accept the identity theft report and get the process started just using that. All right, so those are the three kind of big things, like sort of the triage steps that you want to take if you see identity theft. If somebody gets a notice from the IRS saying that their refund has already been given out, or something else that's compromised about their account, there are other steps to take. So first you want to complete the IRS's identity theft affidavit. We've got the link to the PDF here in the slides. You can also get that link on IdentityTheft.gov. It's available. So you complete the form and you either mail it or fax it back according to the instructions to the IRS. I think we're working on the capability for you to be able to upload the completed form into IdentityTheft.gov, and we'll share it with the IRS, but I'm not sure that that's completely functional yet. But keep an eye on that space. That might be happening soon so that you could do the whole thing through IdentityTheft.gov. So then you want to file your refund and pay your taxes. Then make sure that you place a fraud alert on your credit report in case it's leaked over, right? And then if it's still not resolved, if you're still having problems or getting notices, there's a number at the IRS that you can call to try to escalate your issue with them to get some response. That's 800-908-4490. Okay, so for medical identity theft, it's a similar kind of situation. If you go to a provider and they tell you your benefits are run out, or you that you just saw the doctor on this date for this thing, or there's some sort of confusion, or there's a problem with your medical records. It could be that somebody has taken your insurance number and used your account and stolen benefits from you. Not as prevalent as the other forms of identity theft we've talked about, but it does happen. So you want to ask that healthcare provider for your medical records. Excuse me. You do have a right to get copies of your current medical files from each of your healthcare providers. You're going to have to pay for them, probably, for the most part. You do have to pay for those records, and it can be like $1 a page. So you want to be strategic about how you do that. Plus, you don't want to be completely overloaded with thousands of pages of medical records and try to dive into that and figure out what happened. Your best bet is to start with wherever you think the problem originated. So say if you've got your orthopedist, there was a problem with your orthopedist, you want to start there maybe for the past year and go through to see where there might be a problem or a visit that you know was not yours, or something that you don't recognize, wherever you think the problem started. And then if that doesn't help you track it down, then maybe you broaden to some affiliated providers that might have encountered this identity thief and provided services. Or you might want to extend the date, so go back to the orthopedist and get your records, for 2 years or 3 years. I wouldn't start out with, I want 5 years of my medical records for every provider that you had, every hospital visit that everybody in your family has had. It's just going to be overwhelming, and it's going to be much harder for you to sort through and figure out what's what. It's probably better to start small and then expand the search if you need to. When you find where the problem is, and there's a problem in your records, then you want to correct that and send it back to the healthcare provider and say, this doesn't belong to me, this needs to come off my medical records. Same thing that you would do for the credit reporting company. Sometimes there's an issue with HIPAA. Some providers will say, we can't do that, we can't interact with you on this because you could be the identity thief and trying to change somebody's medical records. And so sometimes it can be a little bit of a puzzle to try to get that removed. If you're dealing with a bigger institution, you might try the ombudsman there, and they might be able to step in and help you out. For smaller practices, you're just going to have to be persistent and maybe talk to whoever is managing the office and explain them. You might have to go in person and sort of prove your identity and show your ID and explain that. But it's, if it does happen, not only is it, are they stealing your benefits, but it could be dangerous because your medical records could be mixed in with the medical records of whoever the identity thief is, and you could be completely different. And you don't want your medical records contaminated with medications and services that somebody else got that you didn't get, because that could affect your medical care. So child ID theft. So this happens when a child's social security number is stolen. Could happen in any number of ways, really. But because kids aren't supposed to have credit in their name until they're the age of majority, right? So that could be 16, 17, 18, depending. And so if they have a credit report, there's a problem. You know probably somebody's taken their social security number and they've run up some bills in it. And it could have been going on for a long time. It could have happened when they were a few months old, up until they're 10 or 11 years old, or it could have happened at, a later date. So some people like to do this kind of preemptively to check to make sure their child's credit is okay. Some people get the warning signs that debt collection calls in your child's name, or bills that are showing up saying they're past due in your child's name. Then somebody's taken their social security number and probably used it and used their name as well. So so you start the same way. You go wherever the fraud occurred, and you ask them to close that account. You explain, in case of identity theft, your child is a minor, you're their parent, you're calling, or their guardian, and you're calling to get the account closed. So the issue is kids usually don't have a credit file because they're not supposed to have credit reports. So if there is a credit report that pops up, that confirms the problem. But it's not going to usually show up in your child's name. It's usually going to show up under the social security number. So you want to request a manual search for your child's social security number. Each credit bureau has their own process for it, so you have to call the fraud department and figure out what their process is and what they need from you, and it changes from time to time. So I don't necessarily know at any given point what that is, but if you go onto their fraud site or call up the fraud number, they'll be able to help you. And then once you get that straightened out, you want to request a freeze and just have the credit frozen until they're ready and able to use it. And again, sometimes this is just choice and situation. If you haven't seen the warning signs, as I said, some people like to do it preemptively. They want to do it early on and make sure that the credit stays pristine. They lock it down immediately. Other people will wait until the child is maybe approaching their 16th birthday and then do a search then to make sure that the credit is okay. And if there is a problem, it gives you time to clean it up before they start to apply for their first car loan, or if they're going to borrow money for their education after high school, or anything like that. Before they start to have a need to use that credit, it gives you a little bit of time to clean it up at that point if there is a problem. Okay, so quickly I'm going to walk you through IdentityTheft.gov, which is the FTC's kind of one-stop site where you can file the report so that FTC knows about it. You can get that identity theft report that helps in the recovery process, but you can also get a personalized recovery plan. It'll give you a checklist of all the things that you need to do to get that recovery started, along with the deadlines and little reminders. When you go back in there, it'll remind you, hey, you sent that letter to so-and-so, you have 60 days to hear a response back, you better follow up with them, that kind of stuff. Not in those words, a little simpler, but basically to remind you to keep the process going and get it all filled out. You can also get, so as I mentioned, you want to send the letter to the credit reporting company with the identity theft report to tell them, please take these charges off my credit report, or to the retailer, please close this account. I never opened this account as a result of identity theft. IdentityTheft.gov has blank sample letters that when you fill in your report, it'll auto-populate your information into those sample letters, so that at the end of the process, once you tell them everything that you know, it'll sort of help you figure out what you need to do, and you can generate the cover letter and the identity theft report, and then send those things out right from there, so that hopefully in that one sitting on identity theft report on IdentityTheft.gov, you'll get that process started and get those letters sent out, and you don't have to start from scratch on everything. So just so that you have an idea of what it looks like, this is the opening page that you'll see when you get into IdentityTheft.gov. You'll have a cover page, kind of a home page, and then if you want to file a report about identity theft, it goes to this, and then you talk about what your particular situation is, and then it depending on what you click, it moves you to the next appropriate response or the next step in the chain. And so this place we've just chosen, credit card accounts have been compromised, but you can see it could be utility accounts or your debit or taxes, things like that. This is the identity theft report that I mentioned that is your legal document that helps you exercise those rights that are only for identity theft victims, and this is the way you exercise them. So most of the time, the identity theft report that is generated is enough to help you get to the next step in the recovery process and to show you're the identity theft victim. In some cases, notably, there are going to be some companies, whether it's a credit reporting company or a retailer or utility, depends. They may say in a particular circumstance, we also need a police report. So the identity theft report is fine, but we need a police report as well. And so, or you need to fill out our particular form, our company form, and you'll have to do that. If you need to get a police report, you can take the identity theft report, bring it to the police, explain the situation, and ask to get a police report. Sometimes this can be tricky because, as I said early on, the victim doesn't very often know how their identity was stolen. You know, if you might, very few circumstances are, I was in this restaurant in Encino and my wallet was stolen and these charges appeared, 2 days later. It's very often that is just not the case. People can't make that link. You don't know really where your information was stolen. And even in the case of having your wallet stolen, maybe the identity theft didn't spring from that. You might have been part of a data breach, and that's how somebody got your information. So the police are sometimes hesitant to issue the reports because it's not really in their jurisdiction and they're not sure what to do with it. More and more police departments are sort of seeing the fact that this is one of the few things they can do really to help the identity theft victim and to help them move that process along. And so they're willing to do it. And if they have got the identity theft report, it makes it easy. A lot of the time they'll put a cover sheet, the police department cover sheet on it and give you a police report number, but really all the guts of your police report are from the identity theft report. So that's going to really help you because it makes it a little bit easier for them, and you can sort of make the case to them that it's important for you to get this police report in those particular circumstances. If you're still having a hard time or you want to have a little bit of extra persuasiveness, on IdentityTheft.gov, under one of the steps for, file a police report if you need to, there's an FTC memorandum to police that you can download and print out and bring there. And it tries to explain the whole situation to them and why the police report is so important, and the FTC asks for their help in helping the victims this way. And sometimes that can help persuade a police officer to help you get that report. Okay, so this is the stage that I was talking about where you start to create the free account. When you create the free account, then you get your personalized recovery plan, the pre-filled letters. You can come back and update it. And then it saves time if the identity theft progresses beyond whatever it is at this stage. So we would strongly recommend that. Like I said, you don't have to, but you don't get any of the checklists or the pre-filled letters or any of that other information if you don't save it. And then it makes it so much easier to come back and update it at the time. Okay, and then you submit it. And so this is what the recovery plan looks like. It's just a checklist. And then if you click on the arrow, it opens up and tells you the specifics of what you need to do. And then once you've completed, so when we click on the arrow, this is what it tells you. And then once you've actually sent that letter to whoever, here in this case it's Bank of America, check it off, it's completed. And it'll ask you to put in the date to help you keep track of when you did what, in case you need to go back and show that you did certain things. This is an example of one of the sample letters. So it fills in with all the information from whatever you typed in, and then it's ready to go when you're finished. This is the identity theft affidavit from IRS. So if it's tax identity theft that's the problem, you fill this out. And so let's talk a little bit about what you can do going forward. So let's say anybody can do this really, but especially if you've already been a victim of identity theft, there are things that you want to put into place to try to reduce your risk going forward in the future. So probably one of the first things is to make sure that you strengthen all of your password and privacy settings. That includes your financial accounts, your social media accounts, anywhere where there might be your information. You want to make sure it's a strong password and a pretty high privacy setting. You don't need to share everything with everybody, right? You want to be a little bit more mindful about that. You want to handle your personal information with care. So there are going to be times when you need to share sensitive information, like your health insurance number, like your social security number, in the appropriate circumstance, right? There's always going to be a trade-off, right? So maybe you're going to share your social security number with a healthcare provider so that they can verify your identity. That's actually something to help you to make sure that somebody's not misusing your information. But you're not going to share it with the average retailer, right? You may not even want to share your email with a retailer. But then again, if that discount is important enough to you and it's like that one retailer that you love, maybe in that situation you want to do it. But you want to be thoughtful about it, and you want to know where you're sharing your information and to be as careful about it as you possibly can be. So you definitely want to get your credit reports annually. There's a federal law. You're entitled to a free credit report every year from each of those big 3 credit reporting agencies. And so, but the only place that you can get it is annualcreditreport.com. That's really important to remember. There are other sites out there that will try to get you on there that try to mimic that site, and then you end up, they end up charging you for the credit report or asking for payment, or people get confused and think, well, I thought it was supposed to be free, but I guess maybe there's a payment for something. Go to annualcreditreport.com. That's where you get that free annual credit report. So we recommend that you do that so that you get that snapshot of your credit report. Stagger the order so that you order one sort of at the beginning of the year, one in the middle of the year, and then the third one sort of toward the end of the year, so that every 3-4 months you're getting a snapshot from a different credit bureau. So if a problem arises after you've ordered that first one, but before you get the second one, you're going to be able to nip that in the bud much more quickly than if you just ordered them all on the same day at the beginning of January. So definitely do that, because it's important to know the lay of the land and to understand your own financial life and to monitor your bills. When things come in, open them up, look at them, make sure that they look right, or set a date to go online and look at your online statements to make sure that everything lines up, that you recognize all the charges on there, you recognize all the accounts, that if something unexpected or unauthorized pops up, you're going to notice it much more quickly if you're in the habit of looking at it and you're in the habit of knowing kind of what you spent, where, and on what card during the course of the month. You don't want to carry too much in your purse or wallet, especially not things like your Medicare card or your Social Security card. They're really not necessary to carry around. You might need a Medicare card for a doctor's appointment, and so maybe you bring it with you to that doctor and you bring it home, but you don't walk around with it all the time. And then you want to sort of make this a habit, make it a part of life. Share it with friends, family, colleagues, neighbors. Share the tips on your social network so other people know kind of what the current safety standards are, and to try to conform their habits to that, because that will help protect them. One last shout out for the FTC's main site for libraries, ftc.gov/libraries. And so this is a curated list of all of our big campaigns. So IdentityTheft.gov is on there. Some of our financial literacy is on there. We have a campaign for military consumers. Everything we produce is also translated into Spanish. Some of our things are translated into other languages. We have stuff for young adults and teens, for older patrons. And so this is, the site is curated by audience, but it's got a lot of our big major educational things on there, organized by audience, with some programming ideas that go along with it to give you some ideas on how to develop a whole consumer ed program around a particular time of the year or a particular promotion that happens, like Identity Theft Day, or there's all kinds of military promotions and back to school days and things like that for the teens and young adults. And also ideas for how to include some of these tips within existing programming so that you don't have to create a whole program. You can just slip some tips and a few activities into an existing program and still help people and still use the information. You can order the free materials, as I mentioned. You can get email updates about scams as they're happening. And now with coronavirus, we're seeing all kinds of scams take on a new hook. So that might be a helpful thing to get for a little while. And you can just go to ftc.gov/libraries and look around, and you'll get all of those things. And this is just a picture of the various publications. We've got many more than this, but just to give you an idea of what we have on our bulk order website. And that is the end of my presentation, but I'd love to hear from people. I'd love to hear how you're reaching out to your patrons now during the pandemic and while we're all kind of shut down and we're sort of partially reopening and partially not, and how you're interacting with your patrons. You see my email there. Would love to hear from anybody with comments, questions, kudos, anything. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.